Welcome back, subscribers. I've got some information. I guess we're going to talk about whether or not it's inside information, or like where is it coming from? Like how are you putting these elements and things together? So my whole experience so far as being a human has been you have this human mechanism. It's like a defense mechanism, all right. But the defense mechanism that's inside of humans, which is typically always angled towards survivability, all right. So the history of it, you'd have this would go back to, you know, running around in loincloths. So I was, fighting animals in the wild, so on and so so that mechanism's like burned into our hard drive, okay, as human beings. Excuse me. But as civilization became more civilized as time went by, we just shifted that into different defense elements, right? Things that seem dangerous, like the difference if you took today and then you went camping, or somebody dumped you off in the middle of Yosemite National Forest, like way out in the middle of nowhere. Um, you're gonna have to figure out, like, okay, so your bank accounts and your mortgage and all that BS shit that you go through, your job, responsible for employees, whatever, day to day stuff. None of that matters. It's all about, if you're in that type of situation, the old school way, um, your defense is basically, where am I going to be safe to sleep? The animals that are there, how am I going to feed myself? I need shelter if it rains. What are the temperatures? So on and so on. Stuff like that, right? Serious shit, like life or death. So that's gone, for the most part, unless you're like into it, right? You can go out and do it. I've got a friend that, well, he's a former associate of mine, that he would take these trips up to Wyoming and do hunting trips, but do and take pack horses, like do it like old school and hunt with a bow. Like he was really into like the bare bones primitive form of hunting, and just go out there like really old school. Um, so some people are really still into that type of stuff. And then, but what we have in civilization is we've got a little bit different mechanism that's set up. So survivability is like, can you pay your bills? Can you, what's your retirement look like? Is everything okay in if you have children, what are their lives like? Were they educated properly? Did you raise them properly? It all depends on what stage you are. Are you going to have children, right? And so and then once you have those children, what education do you give them? Where do they? It's endless, the amount of choices and decisions that you have to make, which are all transactions. I do this X Y Z, and then it leads to that. All right, so everything that you do has some sort of repercussion into the future, and we're I would say, especially in this day and age, we've got such a data overload out there, is that the data overload is causing people to become more paralyzed, because their processor, how they receive information, whether it's ocular or auditory, or maybe they are intuitive and they feel the vibe of it. Um, they're receiving way too much information, and embedded inside of that information is a lot of chatter, is a lot of background noise that they're not able to decipher whether or not it's a danger or not. And this has been baked into the reality, especially into the United States, um, for quite a while. I think my generation, Gen X, I think we just kind of slowly permeated into this. If you grew up in like the 70s and 80s, and we didn't have the electronics and the influences. We didn't, the dangers were more about like us trying to kind of work the system, like against the parents or the teachers, the law, name it, you name it. But it was very easy to say like, oh, well, we're, to kind of game the system, to have a more robust experience, be like, well, just because I'm not 21 doesn't mean that I'm not going to go out and drink. Be like everybody does it, whatever, or it's smoking dope or something like that. So it all depended upon what area and environment that you grew up in, establish that um, system breaking. We're gonna not necessarily like fight the system, but we're not going to comply. We're going to tell you we're complying, but we're really not complying. And it was pretty easy to get over on your parents, because the our parent generation, the baby boomer generation, they were just really tuned out. They at that I've talked about this before, that they were really run through the ringer with all the social programming that was thrown at them from their inception, from polio vaccine, uh, social injustices through the 60s, uh, Vietnam War, the draft, Watergate, breaking of the government. Like, if anybody, just Watergate, if the sense of right now of like the United States and how the government runs, like the kings and no kings thing, be like, hey, this already happened. Just understand the history of what happened during Watergate. And that showed that the government was the people behind the scenes of the government were fixing everything. It's fixed. All right. And that was, I, many people I've talked to that are in that generation, the boomer generation, we were like, we were going to leave the country. So like this stuff that's happening right now is nothing new. So, but we still live in a really good environment, that we have availability of things that other people in other countries don't have, which makes the United States a valuable territory to be living in if you're a human being. You can bitch and moan all you want about the way that the system runs, but for the most part, like we have things. Now, the the change to this that's going to be coming in are some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And if you can have some of this mental clarity in moving forward, and the things that are going to start coming out in public space are going to be really muddied up, and you're going to need to know, how do I fix it? And I don't really hear a hell of a lot of people talking about it. And that's frustrating to me as a problem solver and somebody who's I guess just constantly try to figure out a workaround. Like, I've been always in a situation where it's just kind of, again, it's like baked into my DNA that there has to be some kind of catch. Be like, all right, everyone's talking about, here's all the problems, da, 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 da. But out of this, it's essentially like squeezing the population. All right. And once that squeezing happens, someone, okay, or not necessarily a group, but somebody's gonna like pop out. All right. And whoever pops out, those become the leaders of the future. All right. So whenever you continue to keep bottling up and entrapping and getting people to follow the same rules and go into these systems, um, they it's essentially like a chess match is the best way to describe it, where you're one of these pawns that's inside the game that the upper management, the administrators, are playing. And they're essentially, over generations, they're trying to get you to get inside of a fixed position. Like, oh well, we know that this happens, we know that we need to go in this direction, we're going to move over here, this is what everybody does, this is how you're successful. And then there's other people that are like, that's not sustainable, like that's not a good space to be in. You have to sell out your morals, you have to do something, you sell out in order to be in that space. But since everybody else is doing it, it's like, well, when in Rome, I'm going to do that, right? Well, we're at this moment in time where they have created all of these belief systems. All right. You would chalk all those things up as belief systems because they're all made up. All right. And just because everybody else is doing them doesn't make it right. So those of you that have recognized this and being like, the inflationary of our money system isn't sustainable. The way that the banks hand out loans and create money out of thin air isn't really a sustainable situation. The U.S. debt isn't a sustainable situation. The retirement funds and things like that. Many people that I've talked to, whenever they get to the retirement age, this is a nuance of this, is that they're really concerned with, like, if I stop working, the money that I have saved, is that going to be enough for me if I live to XYZ years. So if you go talk to a financial planner, they're like, okay, you're whatever age you retire at, you're 50, 65, maybe never going to retire. I don't know. That you're just in a situation where you're not sure. And based upon inflationary, if things continue to go in the direction, if you're a financial planner right now, I'd be like, that'd be a total nightmare to have to try to uh, position people for the future in the next 10 to 20 years, because there's so much uncertainty out there. I mean, we just had a spike in oil and gas of like 60-70%. So if that continues on in that trend, then you can't stop working. So I don't really know what's going on in the financial planning environment. They're probably just doling out a bunch of bullshit, because the past was that, well, this will pass, this will be fine this time, and it always passes and everything is fine. And that's if you're getting that type of information, that's not the case. And so anyway, there's a number of these elements that are inside that are baked into the current state of the situation of what's going on worldwide. It's not just the United States, it's worldwide. All the turmoil and tensions and things like that. And we're talking about territorial dividing of jurisdictional rulership, meaning like what government owns what territory, or what government administrates over a specific territory, meaning what are the laws behind that piece of land, right? How is their money moved inside that land? What are the options for the citizens of that land to prosper and move forward? Is that territory earmarked as being a expansive territory, a repressive territory, or we're going to try to keep it static so that it remains a power, right, if you will. And that's where the defense mechanism of the human comes in, where, I mean, unless you're living under a rock, you could tell that there's some things that are going on that are impacting. It's the vibe that you're getting, that there's just too many problems that are going on, and that historically speaking, say like a Gen X or a baby boomer, when you talk with us, or them, the boomers, they will, the identification of like how serious the situation is currently right now is very high. And there doesn't any real solutions that people are putting out there. And since I'm solution oriented, I'm like, well, this sounds like this is an opportunity. So how in the world can I position myself and my family to get through this? I was always fascinated in history that there'd be situations that you would see. I was always interested. I remember being young and being interested in this, like say walking in a graveyard. We'd be in great. I remember like just they were all. I was in the Northeast, so there's graveyards all over the place, and it was places that we could go and just be. They were quiet, and you could kind of like I don't know, like play in the graveyard. You could when we got older, we'd drink in it, ride our bikes in it, all kinds of stuff. But I would look at the tombstones and the birth dates. They were very interesting to me, where I would think to myself, I remember a very young age, that when somebody was born, what time were they born into? And if I saw somebody that was born like say 1850 or 55, 60, something like that, 64, like right in the heart of the Civil War, like right either before or after, or during rather, it was always fascinating to me, because I wondered like, gosh, how could their parents be like, I'm going to bring a child into this world? Now, obviously the ones that are before, they wouldn't have known, or maybe they did know the politics of the time. But that would be like, wow, we're going into a dangerous situation. I don't think this is really the right time, to get the bone on and bring a child into the world. But again, that's like humans don't really think that way. Typically, they're not really planning pregnancies. So some are, but for the most part, that it's just always kind of like taking over, But in good times, there's lots of children. In not so good times, then it's very, very, you can see this in population rises and falls. Like when humans are in a space of prosperous environment where they know they can provide for another generation, as long if they have their faculties, they will procreate more. It's a known element. So anyway, it was always fascinating to me to see something like that. Be like, wow, I wonder what it would have been like to grow up in like post South after the Civil War. Like what was the thinking back then? What were what's the situation like? And in the North, like things were prospering in the North and compressing in the South. So just in that history alone, you can see this kind of like dichotomy where there's this kind of back and forth, pushing back and forth between the haves and have-nots. They always have this like it's a dualistic uh, uh, environment we live in, and that's the identifiable element to this. So now instead of it just being the North and the South, we're talking about like global, and inside the global now, right? So like if you took like say like a bag or like a vessel of something, right? And if you only took back in the 1865, you've got just the bottle of the South of the United States, and those that were doing business with the South, right? And those that were doing business with the South are just saying like, well, we won't do business with the South anymore. We'll do business with the North, or we'll do it with another territory. It doesn't matter to us. It's a business plan. So whatever country was trading with the South, they'll trade with somebody else. It's not a big deal to them. So the only people that really lost were the Southerners, right? And but then the prosperous area, they just kept on trucking. So, but now we're in a different situation. Now we're in a global, universal system where everyone that is inside of this new digital system is being thrown into this vessel of basically entrapment. All right, and that vessel is squeezing because the the more that comes in as far as the digital identifications, uh, proper documentation, where are you a citizen of, moving around, fuel costs for transportation and traveling and things like that. It's squeezing the economies of the world. It's not just north and south. It's squeezing everything. And out of that, just like what happened in the Civil War in the United States, people got incredibly wealthy. So, like, if you were in the South, for example, and you could see the writing on the wall, and you didn't want to go, I mean, there was a lot of loyalty back in this period. Like in the old days, there was a lot more loyalty, and you'd say, like, well, why don't we just sell our stuff and pack it up and then just get out of Dodge? All right. So people that had wealth and money, they could already see this now and get out. So people that have wealth, they typically that there's like these tiers. So there's like the general population, and then people that are business owners that have accrued wealth over some generations, and then inside of that bracket, there's secret society, older money, people that are connected to uh, other forms of like thought forms, on understanding history and understanding if they're well educated, they have like a classic education. They would know from history that these cycles repeat, and they would say, well, there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. Who am I going to hedge my bets on? All right. And then you would be looking at the total dynamic and saying like, well, who's controlling, who has the upper hand on all of it? Now, out of that wealth bracket, there's a very thin line of people that are aware that no matter what, they have to leave their belief systems behind, because the belief system will keep you entrenched inside of that bracket. And if you're inside of the South, whether it's the South or the North, you would be kind of earmarked to being like, you're gonna go broke, or you're gonna be incredibly prosperous, right? And it's just because you live in a specific territory, jurisdiction. But now we're talking about worldwide, no borders. It's everywhere. It's going to be everywhere. It is. Everybody's getting the squeeze. So understanding that there's this line in the sand that says like, all right, well, what are my belief systems? What exactly are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about like everything that we've understood as far as like I'll just use in the United States as an example. What you have grown up with and what you've experienced of how easy our lives have become. You just get on your mobile device and you order something to your house and it comes and there's like, this is great. I can choose from all these different products. It gets delivered. It's super, super simple. Um, it's been rogue. There's no tracking on it. They can track it obviously through your credit card and your local business account or your bank accounts and things like that. But nobody really knows until, like, say you went to Amazon and you go through your orders and you're like, oh, I think I remember ordering XYZ last year. What was the name of the manufacturer? And you can go back through your orders and see exactly what you purchased and purchase it again, because on Amazon it's like it's an advertisement element where it'll just put another company or another product that's similar to it at the top of the list, and that's what you're going to be kind of funneled towards to buy. And it's like an impulse buy. It's not like I'm consistently buying the same product that I know that works. That a lot of people aren't tracking that. Amazon tracks it for you. Um, so back to the jurisdictional change and these things that are happening and breaking belief systems. So anyway, you wouldn't people wouldn't necessarily consider that as a belief, but they're leaning on it that they have to have that in order to function in society. Right? And then again comes the defense mechanism. So if things are that simple to get along in the world now, in the United States, what are you going to what are you actually really defending, or like what, like as far as your survivability? And people, I don't think they're thinking or have ever really put any thought into that being a survival mechanism of just something being easy. All right. So for example, you back it up and saying like, well, if you were nomadic and you came across the big grove of like a berry patch or something that produced food that you could eat, you'd be like, oh, let's set up shop here and we don't necessarily have to follow the herds. Why don't we just, if the herds run through here, why don't we start planting and setting in roots? And then that starts like the belief system of the territory. Same type of thing. Well, this is again changing because what they're doing with this tracking system is they're creating this environment that um, every little tiny little thing that you do, which is transactional, everything you buy, purchase, whatever, it starts setting, uh, giving a scenario, if you will. So if you, it's a probability scenario that at the end of the day, it's a chess match. In 10 years or 15 years, that this human is going to be in XYZ and they're going to need this, this, and this. They're six pack Joe or Jane, and then well, if we have the data that shows that people that are in that bracket, by the time they hit age 45 to 50, that their bodies are breaking down and they're going to need XYZ amount of health care. All right. So this is all stemmed into governmental, people will call it control, but how to run and manage the society. Like if you're playing one of those simulation games like Sim Earth or Sim City or something like that, and you had to already have something in place for the people, so that whenever it's, because that this is a road to destruction, six pack Joe, that you're going to need XYZ. And then I guess we'll just make money off of this because you're just going to be going and running to the doctor all the time. And we'll just give you some meds to satiate your destruction of your body, of your vessel. And we're just going to go ahead and I can't change the way you think. So we're just going to provide services and business to compensate for your behavior. All right. So it's not about just being like a good person. It's about like, well, following the rules of what, like how you take care of your body, how local society works and your local government, and then the federal government, and so on and so on. So whatever direction you decide to step into is a belief system, or uh, it's a cultural system that you've been kind of indoctrinated into, right? It's like people that like, let's use an example. They grow up in a trailer park, they grow up in a ghetto, or they're incredibly wealthy, right? That they expect that that's basically what their life is going to be, that they have very few choices. They say like, well, the person who's really wealthy and has generational wealth, they have more choices than, six pack Joe that's in the trailer park. And be like, no, they don't. They don't, because they're actually in a more fearful state because they're more concerned about losing what they have, or they're completely oblivious to it because it's come so easy. And then six pack Joe and Jane, they can't go any further down. So, but they could go up, but they typically remain pretty static. And like if you graphed it, it would stay like, okay, well, each generation that goes by, it's going to be the same relative output of what the human can do. And the people that are at the top, again, aren't doing anything because they've created this system of survivability of keeping their wealth and their status and how they consistently do things. And whenever this happens in societies, and this is usually about every 3 generations, about 100 years, that the administrations know this. This is known in this is like one of these known baked-in elements in secret societal environments, which are directly involved in orchestration of changing and keeping economies rolling. Because that's really what their driver is business is about keeping their localized businesses going and humans going to work and doing their thing, so that on the bigger game that they're in contact with they're basically mafias, that the upper level mafias know that Six Pack Joe is going to always do this. And then these middle class people are always going to do that. And they're always going to produce this. And so they can basically graph it out and say like, okay, like on the world game, like, well, how are we playing? Who's giving territorial, you know, uh, how the territory is being kind of divvied up and the game played on the nation state level between China and the United States and so on and so on. And inside these societies, each nation state, they try to manipulate those said classes in order to either elevate or deplete, in order to be able to have a more robust game backing, if you will, on the nation state level. So, but now because of this digital tracking and everything that's happening universally, worldwide, um, it's a reset. So the haves and the have-nots are going to be reset. That's what you have to say, reset. So so they're just going to take their money? No, they're going to create systems that basically it'll be like a sort of a penalty, is the best way to think of it, is that if you have a bunch of things, then that will become essentially a liability to you as the person. All right. And that's what we talk about inside Reservoir. Is like, all right, if you have things, how do I get it so that I can, like, say imagine you're living in the South in the 1860, right? Or pre-Civil War, and you see the writing on the wall and you're like, I know there's a freaking problem here, and I've got a really bad vibe that the South is not, based upon some people that I'm talking to, that they're so sure that they're going to secede and they're going to go do their own thing. But I know damn well that that's not how it works. All right. Because because maybe you're in a secret society or how the histories work, and it'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they're always consolidating. It's always a consolidation to make more efficient. And whenever these consolidations happen, that there's ones that pop out and end up moving into environments that are more prosperous to them. So you have to try to earmark those things to allow yourself to keep the chaff away and only take the seed. And that's what we're doing inside of our group is creating an environment that is a privatized environment where we can trade information on where to go. So imagine you're in the South and you don't want your neighbor to really know what's going on, because when you start throwing out this information, these are intellectual people that know that this happens and know that, the writing's on the wall, and I'm starting to run into friction whenever I'm doing my business the old way and how I'm managing my money and keeping my wealth. I'm running into friction, and where's this going? And the information that we provide in the site and the information that we trade internally it's proprietary knowledge, because we had some inside information, and it got me into an environment. The both of us, Frank and I, are both really into this because we're both really fascinated with history. And whenever these changes happen in history, how the regular population can't see it and then can't see the solution, because they always mask the solution, because the people that create the problem are also saying like, well, we're going to create a problem, but we're going to already put ourselves into the new system so that we get first dibs on everything. We get first dibs. All right. And it's kind of like them saying they get the inside information because they're the ones that have created the whole system. So they already know. They're like, all right, I'm going to put my assets into this class. I'm going to go make sure that this is protected over here and XYZ, whatever. And they're already positioned years ahead of time because they already know the directive of what's going to, what's the end game of it. So the people that had the money in the South during, pre-Civil War that were already in the know, they moved their money out. It was a wealth distribution. So the people that were wealthy in the South that were read in, that were all right with not being, loyal necessarily to the South and fight the fight, or maybe they hedge their bets. They're like, well, with whatever way it goes, it's kind of 50-50. Either the South's going to win or the North is going to win. I'm going to maybe put 50% of my assets into the North, 50% in the South. They diversify. They're smart. But they don't tell anybody about it, right? Because they don't want their neighbor to know, like, you just invested in the North, dude, we're going to string you up, right? So that's why this stuff has to be kind of private, because the information, it's not as drastic as that, but there's going to be a disintegration, if you will, of the belief system of what's been chummed into us in the United States and other countries in general. Nationalism, it's a belief system. National belief, believing in the flag, believing in the jurisdiction. And this has nothing to do with war, and that's a whole nother element. This is all about just asset protection and the country moving forward in a way that is prosperous to you, right? So the country's going to keep on trucking, but they're 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 giving another option to this digital system, and they've created such a muddied environment, for people to step into it, that many won't. They won't even consider doing it. So as I started looking into this and getting involved in crypto, etc., it identified itself. So that's the information we talk about in the reservoir, and on the private tier, we get really into the bones of what are the directions, like how do I need to position myself through this transitional change, because by 2030 it's going to start really around 2028 to 2030, somewhere in that range. It's going to be incredibly difficult to it's going to be more difficult to move assets and be more secure inside that space, and that's the information that we provide. So anyway, if you're concerned and you just want to know what's going on, that's what we talk about as well too. And so it's not just people of great wealth or business owners, etc. It's just help me understand what's going on. All right. So it's all about the business. Always follow the money, but we're following it on the front end. We're like, I want to know where's it funneling now, and where's everybody, where are these people that are in the know, where are they getting set up, and where does that lead? And that's what we talk about. So cheers.